All right. Hello and welcome to Using Integrated Security to Overcome Adversaries. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Mimecast, Netskope, and SecureWorks and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I am with Actual Tech Media, and I am so excited to be your moderator for this conversation because not only do we have a panel of absolutely fascinating experts here with us today, but we are digging in on such an interesting key consideration, and that is quality versus quantity, because the reality is that security risks move so quickly, right? And the threat landscape is evolving so rapidly. So there's a lot of organizations out there that are just kind of sticking things onto their cybersecurity infrastructure in this rush to keep up with that, right? So now you've created this potentially overwhelming security blob, the security Frankenstein. But more is not necessarily merrier when it comes to cybersecurity tools, and having the right solution in your strategy, in your tool chest, can save you time, save you money, save you resources, and reduce that risk. So if that's feeling a little bit too close to home, maybe you're recognizing that blob and Frankenstein a little more than you wish you did, don't worry, because we have the right people here to help give you some answers. Now, I'm going to get our expert speakers out here with me in just a moment, but I want to go through some quick housekeeping points, and then we're going to get this show on the road. So let's start out. We're going to do a little bit of a guided tour of your audience console here. Let's take a look at your question section of the webinar console. So this question section is the best place to get involved. You're going to get interactive. You're going to post all those questions, comments, the feedback, the ideas, anything that kind of pops in your head. We want to hear from you. All of that is happening in that handy dandy questions window on your console. So a great way to give it a test run right now is to find that questions window. And if you haven't already said hi or hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at, to the folks out there with us today, please do take a moment now and do that. We love seeing all of you folks connecting. Now, a quick side note on that questions window, that is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you do have any technical issues today. Knock on wood, of course. And I do want to remind you all that a browser refresh is going to get rid of any of the usual tech gremlins. But if they are clinging on today, they're powered up by all the Wednesday vibes, no worries. Just shoot us a message there in the questions window, and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help you out. All right, the last thing I want to point out on your audience console today is the handouts tab. Please do go check out some very cool resources and follow-ups from our conversation today. Spend some time exploring. There's actually a really neat resource center there that I think you should all spend some time with from Mimecast. So make sure you've got that link opened up. Save that in your browser for after we wrap today, because you're going to want to spend a little time following up. All right, now, and the last thing I'm going to talk about is prizes, because I know that little icon on the screen caught your eye there. So you're wondering about that. We do have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing that we will be giving away at the end of our webinar. Now, you do need to be here in live attendance in order to qualify to win that prize, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, no problem. You can head on over to that handouts tab we were just chatting about, click in, scroll down, and you will find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. All right, folks. Well, first, I want to say I'm seeing some awesome highs and hellos coming in from we've got London, and we've got Chicago and the Bay Area. Just a whole awesome crew out there with us today, which I love. Speaking of awesome crews, look at this all-star cast that we have with us today. We are going to be chatting with this absolute superstar lineup of expert presenters, and that's Joseph Tibbetts, Senior Director of Technology Alliances and API at Mimecast, David Willis, Head of Technology Integrations, Technology Alliances at Netskope, and Ryan Albin, Director, Global Presale Strategy and Operations at SecureWorks. Joseph, David, and Ryan are waiting in the wings here. I can't wait to bring them out and get started on this conversation. So give me 1 second here, and I'm going to get our experts on out with me. Just a moment. I'll step on camera. All right, well, here we are, ready to kick things off. I am so excited to jump into this conversation. We have a room absolutely full of incredible experts here today. And so, Joe, I'm going to hand things over to you. Can you tell us who's here with us? What are we going to be talking about today?
I love it. We're talking about an integrated security environment here with my friend David Willis and Ryan Albin. So let me start with a quick introduction of myself, then we'll hand off so you can kind of get to know us a little bit more, and then we'll jump right into a conversation. So I'm Joe Tibbetts. I work at Mimecast. I'm the Senior Director of our Technology Alliance program. So what I focus on doing is helping connect the dots between our customers' security tools. So my 60 to 70 hours a week is really, really fun. I get to kind of learn what technologies and what challenges are there and how to plug and play. And by the way, integrations tend to be free and really, really powerful. So looking forward to geeking out over the next hour and a half's worth of our conversations. Uh, friend David Willis with Netskope.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Joe. Dave Willis, I am basically Joe's equivalent at Netskope. I am the head of technology integrations as a member of the Technology Alliances team. I've been here at Netskope for about half of Netskope's life, so I've been involved in most of the integrations that we've released. It's been a lot of fun. As I like to say it, I make sure our stuff works with other companies' stuff to do good stuff for customers. And I like to leave it at the stuff level because there's so many different things that we can do that ultimately are hopefully meeting your needs. So very excited to be here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
Thanks, David. Howdy, folks. My name's Ryan Albin. I'm with SecureWorks. And really, to David's point, there was a time where I was a customer of SecureWorks. And so I knew what it was like to try to use these different solutions together. And that really drives a lot of my involvement with our Technology Alliances program. So I'm a director within our pre-sales organization that supports the Technology Alliances program. And we get to work every day with some really extraordinary customers, listen to their needs and feedback, and then work with our alliance partners to make it a reality within the product. So it's really a great vantage point to see 360 degrees of the cybersecurity market and being able to bring forward solutions that really solve problems for real operators.
Thank you, gentlemen. So, what we wanted to do was start with the cybersecurity conversation. And of course, when I said, well, this is great, Mimecast is talking about phishing and ransomware for 2.5 hours, David and Ryan said, well, there's other topics out there. So, what we decided to do when you registered, there was a chance to kind of put questions in. And we're using actually your feedback as the topics that we're going to cover. So, the first one, by your demand, is ChatGPT. So we got a couple of questions specifically coming in, such as, are you seeing more and more companies using ChatGPT? How are companies securing ChatGPT? What's a governance model for ChatGPT? So all in that same framework. So broadening this up a little bit, maybe, Ryan and David, what are we seeing companies consume in what use cases and what are they doing with ChatGPT to gain those efficiencies? And then I'd like to pivot the conversation to then from oh boy, I'm a security team. I've got to now protect myself from leaking all this data into this black box and whatnot. What are we seeing from a protection perspective? What types of governance models are put in place? Either you want to kick off?
Ryan, if it's all right, I'd love to start.
Absolutely.
All right. So I would say that with the exception of Threads, which apparently is now the fastest growing application in history, I would say ChatGPT and the collective bucket it falls into, generative AI, has probably been the fastest growing application we've ever seen that's been born out. It's also the most impactful. I don't think Threads is going to change our behaviors and our governance models, but ChatGPT is. And why is it doing it? First of all, I think it's because people really don't know what it is. I think it's this wonderful black box that has a different meaning to everyone, like zero trust. And so ChatGPT is this tool where people are feeding information into it to just see what kind of comes out the other side. And they're not cognizant of what is what is involved in sharing that information. And so we're seeing lots of different use cases, right? Initially, most companies are not creating like their own large language models, which are sort of guiding and normalizing the kinds of information that's going in. So you know what's coming out. What they're doing is they're saying, okay, I'm going to take this presentation or I'm going to take this collection of information like meetings, and I'm going to upload all of this so I can get a summary of all of that information because I would have had to do that manually. But I've heard that this tool is going to collect all of it and it's going to spit out all the action items, or it's going to graph all of the project flows. And this is incredibly helpful when you think about it from the perspective of our users, right? They would spend hours, maybe weeks, trying to do this manual labor when you can upload it all to this cloud and it will do a lot of that work for you. Now, that's great. The problem is, in most cases, people are uploading this to a collective open source consortium that is feeding this intelligence into a larger open source language model, which means I've now given all of the notes about all of my internal meetings to the world. And so it has incredible power, but it just with great power, to paraphrase a superhero, comes great responsibility. And I don't think people have quite figured that out. I mean, there are warning notices, and even ChatGPT has limitations on how much you can upload. But the reality is, people are they're playing, and they're not realizing how dangerous. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about a company I won't name that did exactly this. They uploaded all of these meeting notes and some intellectual property, some designs into this tool, not knowing that it was going to be basically rendering it into the public domain. So what customers are starting to figure out kind of after the fact is, A, who's using it? Oh my gosh, everyone in my company is trying this for different use cases. And B, how do I control this data? I don't want to cut this off because it is so powerful. It's so productive, but I need to have some wrappers around it. And there are technologies that luckily are already in play that can be deployed to basically coach users to appropriately use this without resulting in the nuclear option, which is unplugging, right? We don't want to unplug people from these powerful tools, but what we need to do is create models that leverage existing governance and risk approaches to saying this is the kind of information that can be shared, this is the kind of information that you can pull down, and this is how you should use the tool. So
I know it's not usually the great strategy of yes or no. It's always that area in the middle. Okay, please, Ryan.
And that's a great point, Joe, because as security professionals, there was an era where we were associated with no. And what a short-sighted attitude that has, and really did not serve security well during digital transformation. No, you can't move this to the cloud became now we're playing catch up. So I definitely encourage security professionals to run towards AI, to embrace it, to learn. We're very much in the hello world period right now. There's a very simple and very powerful use cases that come out of the tool. We need to, make mistakes. We need to learn from them. We need to have guardrails to make sure, there will be, security incidents that happen from this, but they're probably not the kind of incident that's going to be catastrophic to your enterprise, right? These are learning opportunities to lean in, to lean forward, and to embrace AI. And I think really resonated with your point around the efficiencies we see with having summarization capabilities, generative capabilities. Just within our own experimentation with large language models, we've observed that when our analysts within our MDR operations are performing an investigation, the actual act of performing the investigation can be completed in a fairly reasonable amount of time. But when it comes to generating a write-up for a human to understand in well-constructed prose, it can take 3 times longer. So there's a lot of opportunity to really help accelerate the pace of security by responsibly adopting these tools. And let's, this time around, let's not be the folks of no. Let's embrace it. Let's put some guardrails on it, and let's move forward together.
It's really interesting. I'm in that exploratory mode myself, going through and talking to a lot of customers about what they're doing now, talking to security teams, and some are using log analysis. So I've done it with some dummy logs, saying, hey, take a look, and it tells you exactly what's in the log. It kind of demystifies what's there. You can have it write some Splunk scripts to showcase how to do this, that. I mean, what it can do is pretty impressive. Marketing organizations taking full advantage of content and whatnot, and you get 80-20. You get 80% of it done, and you just tweak the 20% around the edge. So it sounds like from a security perspective, I know both of you kind of dabble in that world, your companies do. What I'm hearing is from a governance perspective, it's really making sure that technology is sitting down with the business lines to really partner together to determine what is appropriate for that given firm, and then you look to implement various controls and practices. Either of you have any good security thoughts on that?
I mean, it's in a sense, while it's a very exciting technology and a really new use case, it's a SaaS application that you're sending intellectual property to, and
That's right.
we have models for that, right?
Yeah.
We've seen this with other security tools when you're uploading attachments for analysis or other things that contain intellectual property. So in that sense, we have the design patterns for what responsible looks like in those senses, and it's really just reminding our user community and putting in place those policies and practices that it's another one in this category. We've learned these lessons in another era. Now let's bring that design pattern, and what else do we need to surround it with its unique capabilities?
Ryan's nailed it. As long as companies have a GRC practice, as long as they have a onboarding understanding of third-party trust or third-party risk that's implicit in taking data and putting it in the cloud, it's just one more tool. The only difference is everybody wants to use it right now. And so now you've got this whole education and guardrails that maybe were not in place. Now it's like the rush is on. We gotta implement that.
No, that's great. All right, let's cover a second topic. That's great. All right, let's cover a second topic, which is fairly related. We have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 questions tied to AI. So we could either spend 3 hours debating the difference between AI and ML, or we could actually get into the general premise. So what we're hearing, how do you foresee AI helping keep businesses secure today and in the future? How does this particular product work with actual AI? How will adversaries be overcome with AI now in the picture? A whole ton of topics tied to that. But if we bring it down to AI is out there, cybersecurity firms are looking to incorporate that into their technology stacks across the board to better protect customers, because the advent of all of these capabilities are going to make the attacks more sophisticated, more robust, more prevalent, easy to get access to. Maybe we start with what some of your firms are doing with AI internally.
Yeah, I'll maybe kick us off here. When we built Taegis platform, it was to take advantage of advanced data sciences technologies that didn't exist 10 years ago. And we needed something that could move nimbly, we could build upon, we could adapt quickly. And we've seen a number of really exciting dividends from this investment to improve security outcomes for customers. One example that comes to mind recently that we're always excited to talk about is some of our advanced detection capabilities, in a particular detector within our Taegis platform, XDR, called hands-on keyboard detector. And this is bringing together, really our vast experience of looking at process events from multiple EDR tools and having a very comprehensive training data set to know what good looks like and what bad looks like, and train models to help to detect this within what might appear to be benign activity by itself. It's been an extraordinarily successful detection capability for us to surface at machine speeds what a very experienced analyst could glance at and say, that looks terrible. We need a role incident response here. But now we can suddenly scale it across millions of process events every day. So that's one that's paid a lot of dividends for us in helping to protect customers and making sure we make the best use of time and human resources.
Yeah, and Netskope has had a very similar thought process, right? I mean, as security professionals, security companies that are dealing with millions, billions of data points, you have to have some way to analyze the data, and it's not going to be going through spreadsheets, right, or grep. So, these advanced analytics approaches, either being machine learned or using AI algorithms, they've been absolutely essential for us as we enhance our own ability to detect data and what kinds of data there is. One of the biggest issues with data protection is classifying data. And because data can be obfuscated and hidden so many different ways. So you have to have a very intelligent way that is looking at fuzzy logic to figure out what does constitute, for example, sensitive data, especially if it's disparate and been broken up over multiple elements. So we've been using AI for a long time for that. Our most recent use of the technology is for a feature we call User Confidence Index, which, much like Ryan was saying, is trying to say, look, we've looked at all of these different ways that users interact with data and applications. What is normal versus what is not normal? And this is incredibly powerful because, that those low, slow attacks, right? Yeah, I can look and say, oh, they're going to a malicious site. That's obviously bad. But what if they start working with this application that they've never touched before? And it's just a little bit. It doesn't seem that bad. But you're like, wait a minute, this user's never gone there. They're coming from a different country than they've ever been. They're uploading really sensitive information. Yeah, they're not doing it very often, but no one else is using this. Ding, ding, ding. Let's start looking, right? So sorting through all of this, you have to have this. I mean, we really have reached a point where companies have to have these tools because there's just too much noise. And so, pulling the signal out of the noise, AI is wonderful for that. So yeah, we're very bullish on it as a tool, and we have to be because frankly, the bad guys have been using it even longer than we have to generate and create polymorphic attacks that are really sophisticated. So we have to use it. It's that escalation of conflict, right? You don't want to show up to a gunfight with a rubber band. You gotta be ready to roll.
No, we have very, very similar thoughts and feedback there. It's one of those things that doesn't get advertised as well as it probably should. And exactly to your points, I mean, we use it in something like, I don't have the exact numbers, 9 to 12 different processing layers. So when you look at a detection stack, there's a different set of detection capabilities for scrubbing a URL than analyzing a file versus trying to graph user behavior. So there's a number of places where we'll plug it in. And to your point, David, with scale, I mean, we see 1.5 billion emails a day. So to go through that with human and trying to, key in those keywords or whatnot, that just doesn't cut it. So you look at areas such as graphing user behavior from who's receiving mails from different sites, very similar use case, David, to yours, to seeing outbound side, letting you warn the users, hey, you've never communicated with this person, similar email address. Are you sure you want to send it to this Hotmail account? That could be an error there. To multiple areas in detection stacks for URO. We also use it in an interesting use case is when you report a mail as suspicious to Mimecast, that goes to our managed security service, and we'll take a look at that. We use AI to prioritize what to look at first, so we're going to look at the most important ones. So it's prevalent across the security stack.
Yeah, I mean, two things that hearing in our conversation, I think are really, folks should take away from this is threat actors are going to leverage these technologies, right? So these are general purpose technologies that good guys can use and bad guys can use. So so you'd be ill-advised to ignore it. And then also just hearing the use cases of there's so many nuanced places even for prioritization or surfacing anomalies to people where humans and AI can work together to leverage their strengths. There's definitely a place for humans in security to exercise intuition and to provide context and understand. But increasingly, as we can transfer this kind of intuition into AI technologies, into different models, it can really help accelerate response and detection capabilities.
And then probably fair to say, when you look at what's the roadmap in the future, I don't think there's a defined roadmap that says given security company is going to do X. It's, this is a technology or a tool in your toolbox available to you, and you look to deploy it wherever it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think ultimately we're in an intense period of innovation, right? So there's things that we can't predict that we're going to see some really exciting returns on. And that could really flip the script before any of us realize the impact of it.
Awesome. We probably have time for one more topic. So really hard to distill this one down, but there was a lot of questions just tied to what trends are you and your team seeing? What are some of the recent attacks and how have they manifested themselves? What are the main differentiators between all of the XDR vendors? What are the security trends your companies are focused on and whatnot? So from a broad trending perspective, would either of you like to kick this one off? What you're saying?
I'll give it a try. I'm pretty sure Ryan's going to have a much broader view. So, of course, Netskope is focused on the cloud primarily, right? Not on endpoints. And so our view is largely governed by what is coming in or going out. And what we're seeing is the volumes of malware delivered from the cloud continues to grow almost exponentially. And what we're not seeing change is where it's being delivered from, which are the big cloud providers. Because just like the good guys, the bad guys love Microsoft. They love Google. So we're not seeing necessarily differences. We're seeing of course, new Trojan variants and families. We're seeing things like Emotet and Agent Tesla still being deployed, but there's just more and more sophisticated ways of getting users to grab those, either through drive-by downloads or more sophisticated smishing or spear phishing or whatever the case may be. But all that's happening is the volumes are growing. And the permutations are speeding up because people are figuring out how to, again, use some of these cool tools to get around things like signature-based detections, which frankly, the days of signature-based detections are becoming, they're numbered. So I don't think there's anything changing except the pace in our world.
Yeah, it's a great observation, David, and certainly from our perspective, seeing telemetry from your solution, the cloud, that ingress egress, from the Mimecast solution and Joe's solution, seeing all the email threats coming in, our incident response practice. We continue to see really these top three initial access vectors, time over time, year after year, unpatched, vulnerable internet-facing devices, phishing, and then credential-based attacks. And the motivations for threat actors they're ever present. I mean, they can monetize our businesses in an industry, and while they are innovating, we are seeing similar pace. We're seeing similar changes in that workaday from their perspective. It's just that perennial cat and mouse game. So how do we raise the tide within the business community to make sure we can detect and respond to these attacks at a reasonable cost, and go about doing what the business of our enterprises is, to fulfill those missions and mature or responsibly defend against these cybercrime activities.
Yeah, Ryan, I've read your security report that comes out annually, and it is interesting where those top buckets stay fairly consistent to going after credentials. It is pretty impressive. And if they ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So from an attacker's perspective, they know what to go after. Just adding some email information. One of the interesting things, we do our survey, which hits about 1,600 different practitioners, and 80% saw an increase in email. So when people said, fax is going to go away, well, it did. Paper going away, well, that didn't. And emails going away, well, that hasn't happened yet either. So they're seeing an increase there, but 75% are also seeing an increase in email-based attacks. So then you peel back the onion and say, why is that so? And I mean, these phishing kits, dark web, $15 a month. You got, phishing as a service, ransomware as a service. You don't have to do the work itself. It's all done for you. So with all this AI and whatnot, it's making it easier and easier to attack. The other thing I'll just highlight, there was a 13% rise in ransomware. 66% fell victim out of the 1600s. But interestingly, the smaller firms are being much heavily more targeted than the larger firms. So really, if you're a large enterprise, only 40% were impacted last year. If you were up to 1,000 seats or so, that over 70% were impacted by a ransomware attack. So just kind of some interesting trends out there.
Yeah, it's a business, and business is good to be an adversary right now, and the costs of entry are low. To your point about all these kits, then more threat groups can get involved in the activity, which really attributes towards David's observations about the increased volumes. And it's our job really to work with our customer bases to help them defend themselves. If you would have told my 10-year-old self this is what we'd be doing in 2023, I would have said, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. But here we are.
That's great. So I think at this point in time, some housekeeping, we can bring Jess back in. I do want to let folks know, please add to the Q&A window. We have time at the end of the next session to really do a deep dive and geek out over any questions that are out there as well, too. So please be active.
100%, Joe. Thank you so much, and to all of you. This conversation has been so interesting. I'm literally, if I was sitting down, I'd be on the edge of my seat. I'm on the edge of my toes, listening to every word. And what a great way to kick off this webinar. And I know we have lots more to get into, which is really exciting. Normally, when I come in, I'm kind of saying like, okay, guys, we got to wrap it up. And in this case, we are just ramping up into the second half of our webinar. And before we get into that, here's what we wanted to do for everyone out there in the audience. I'm going to start with a quick reminder. I'm going to echo what Joe just said. First of all, I am seeing some awesome questions coming in. You guys are so engaged. You all clearly had your coffee this morning. That's fantastic. Keep that going. Keep those questions coming in, because we're going to be sort of adapting and adopting to the topics as we go based on your questions. And any questions that we don't get to, because there's lots to cover, we are going to make sure that you get follow-up. So if you get those questions coming in, it's helping guide our flow today, and then you'll get answers in follow-up after we wrap. So stay active in that questions window, and you'll have a good opportunity to do that, because the second part of my messaging to you all right now is that we're going to take a quick break. There's a lot to cover, and every piece of this information is so important. We want to make sure that you don't have to miss it. If you need to, answer a quick email or grab a cup of coffee or run to the restroom or whatever it is you need to do, go pet your dog or something. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you about a 4 to 5 minute break, a quick little palate cleanser here before we get into the main course after our appetizer chat here. I'm really going with this metaphor now, guys. This is
Love it.
Making me hungry.
Yeah, that's it. So now go grab a snack. So everyone stand up, stretch it out, shake it out, take a quick break. Now, while you do that, one more thing that you can do is I'm going to put up a poll in just a second here. And we're going to ask you guys, we have 2 different questions for you. We're going to put them up. Please do take a minute and answer the poll, because again, it's going to help us dig in a little bit more when we come back from our little break. So I'm going to review that for you, because I threw a lot at you all at once. Questions, get them in the questions window. We're going to help answer them today, and we're going to follow up to any that we don't dig into. Polls, they're going to be up for the next few minutes. Please make sure you answer those polls, because we're going to be interacting with them. And break, stand up, stretch it out, go get some coffee, get some water, but make sure you're back here in like 4 minutes. Set a timer right now. I'm going to start chatting with you when it's time to come back, because we've got lots more content to dig into. Guys, thank you so much for this awesome fireside chat kicking us off. And let's take a quick break. We'll meet back here in a few minutes.
Sounds good.
Awesome, Jeff. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, well, we definitely want all of you to stand up, take a little stretch break. Our speakers are going to grab some water and stand up and stretch it out, because we've got lots more to get to. But as I mentioned, we've got these polls up that we're going to kind of go through and maybe talk about a little bit in the second half of our conversation as well. So in order to help me walk through these polls that we have for you, I am going to bring out my friend and fellow moderator, and that is Josh Randall. Now, Josh is a coordinator and guest moderator here at Actual Tech Media, so he gets to spend a lot of time chatting with all of you over live chat, and we thought that he would be a great person to come in and talk us through some of these questions that we have for all of you out there. So let's bring him on out here. Josh, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, no problem, Jess.
All right, well, Josh, what do you got for us up here today?
Yeah, so we have a poll on the screen trying to, gauge where you guys are. Like, what are your key drivers for technology / vendor consolidation? So, got cost, complexity, platform-based integration, resource skills within the team. Got a few options on there, so feel free to click on those as you go through.
All right, so lots of good options there. And while the folks are clicking on that poll, Josh, I got a question for you. We just sat in on a very interesting conversation, and I think there was a lot of really cool takeaways. What's jumping out at you? What was your favorite factoid?
Well, I think my favorite factoid would have to be the note about ChatGPT and governance. And I found it interesting because I was actually reading a tweet from one of the head writers of Ted Lasso this morning about how whenever we reach out to service hubs, there's always that problem. And I know for me personally, I'm always like trying to get to a person to speak to whenever I'm needing to talk to anybody in customer service. She noted like how that interaction is always difficult. So how can we rely on them to write full scripts? And that's kind of the whole base of the entire writer strike is like, AI is coming in and could potentially take their job. But I'm like, yeah, we don't even really want to use AI in the customer service realm. So why would we want to use it, for actors and writers? So I thought that was interesting that he said that it would change governance, because I'm like, we kind of already are seeing that happen in real time.
Boy, that's so interesting. Yeah, the sort of what we do and don't feel comfortable with ChatGPT or AI in general being involved in, and what we are and are not worried about. I'm going to take a quick pause there, Josh, and I'm going to move to our very next question. So if somebody out there was waiting to click on the poll, if you were waffling back and forth, now's your last chance to click on that poll. Okay, bam. Question number 2. Josh, what do you got for us?
Oh, yeah. So over the next year, what scenario best describes your security strategy? Seeking new best of breed technologies to better secure your organization, looking to maximize your existing security tools, or attempting to consolidate security investments. What do you guys look at here?
Now, sorry, John. Now I'm thinking about. I'm spinning out on sort of what we're comfortable with AI being involved in and what we're not, and why we worry about some things and not others. And the conversation is so interesting because it's such a cool blend of psychology and technology and media and pop culture. I mean, everything's involved in this conversation.
Yeah, it really is, because I think the conversation around AI could potentially affect us all in some way. I actually think there was about middle of last year, I stopped by my local Hardee's and they were using AI to take orders. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I think, I'm so used to this little Southern Hardee's always having a human talk to me early in the morning. Like, I want to talk to a person if I'm going to order food. But yeah, it's everywhere. And like, what does it look like for everyone and their jobs and their roles and positions? Like, what changes now that AI could be potentially, the leader in all things?
Josh, I have an embarrassing thing to admit to you before we wrap this up. I don't know what Uncle Hardee's is.
Oh, just Hardee's, but it's a where you get, there's that. That's also that difference between but
Hardee's.
Yeah, it's like it's like a McDonald's but different. They're like, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
The South
everyone from the South just got real mad at me. I can tell. Oh man!
Try some Hardee's breakfast. It's
there. All right. Well, Josh, I have to say, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us, kind of hopefully giving the audience a break. I think I see our speakers are back on with us in the wings. They've been messaging back and forth about all of the poll responses coming in. So I know they're ready to dive in and start kind of taking apart some of the results we're seeing. What Jeffrey says, do you know Whataburger? What's Whataburger? Is that a thing?
Oh yeah, it's a thing. Tennessee just got like overrun with a lot of Whataburgers, so I got the experience Whataburger last year for the first time.
Okay, I thought Jeffrey was messing with me.
He's not at all. It's definitely a real thing.
All right. Well, key future research for some of us here. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being here with us to chat with us today. This was a lot of fun.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep things rolling here because we have our speakers ready to go. They're saying they've been reading the results. They're ready to dive in and help us kind of understand some of what we're seeing here. So give me one moment and let's get us back on track. I'll get myself out on camera again. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice little stretch break or coffee break, whatever you needed. And thanks to all three of you guys. We didn't scare you off. Glad you're back with us.
Happy to be. Yeah.
All right, well, team, we had a couple of questions that we put up for our audience over the break, and I want to take a minute to dive into some of those results. So first and foremost, thank you to everyone out there who took some time to ask a question or answer the poll while we were kind of taking our little break there. And we're going to chat a little bit about some of those results. So the first question that we asked you is, what is your key driver for technology and vendor consolidation? And I have to say, this one was not a tight race at all. Overwhelmingly, the response from the audience today, you guys said cost. So, Joe, does that seem right to you? Is that what you would have expected?
Yeah, to be honest with you, and obviously I have the answers in front of me, but I'm going to tell you, money one quarterback, absolutely not really a shock at all. I mean, folks are just stretched with security budgets. There's so many tools, so many different things out there. Really looking at that cost strategy is driving a lot of security teams from everything that I'm seeing. I don't know, Ryan, David, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I experience the same sentiment with customer conversations I have, and I think particularly now in these interesting economic times that we have, we're all looking for ways to optimize our investments across the business, not just within security, but IT and different operations too. And I think my advice for the security pros on the call is, again, there's no such thing as perfect security, but how can you reduce the most risk per dollar spent? There's no perfect, but what can we do to minimize in those key initial access vectors and make sure we're being good stewards of the resources we have at our disposal?
Absolutely. And to take it a step further, I'm not surprised at all. But what I think is really exciting is as these tools get more sophisticated, there's actually better ROI because there's more outcomes that are possible with these tools, including visibility into activity, into application usage, for example, that people shouldn't be using, right? So instead of security being this standalone stack, it really becomes more of a business outcome tool that facilitates much more useful outcomes, much more financially responsible outcomes for companies than in the past, where they were perceived as, again, the no team. So no, I'm not surprised cost, but I think that by looking through a slightly different lens, in just the way Ryan said, we can actually become ways to reduce costs organically without having to necessarily reduce the spend.
Ooh, I really like that. That is an important point, and I think is going to feed really nicely into our second poll question, which, as Joe just mentioned, we've been watching the results roll in, so we did get a chance to kind of chat about this. And this one was interesting because in your second question, you guys were a little bit more split on what you think out there in the audience. So the question was, over the next year, what scenario best describes your security strategy? And you all did not agree on this one. You were pretty spread. So, Joe, help us interpret that. Why do you think there was the spread, and what would you say?
Yeah, it's kind of like election day, seeing the results come in real time. It's kind of fun. So, it's interesting, right? So there's no agreement of I want better tools and new tools to solve new challenges. It's not to get rid of everything and just buy one big platform. It's and a lot of it's kind of I need to maximize and tweak and tune and really understand my existing investments. What I'm going to say at a macro level is, please listen to this next 30 minutes because we're going to talk about integrating your security technology stacks. Hopefully many of you are Mimecast, SecWX, and Netskope customers. We're going to show you exactly how to integrate those best of breed tools here. But with that kind of lame answer, David, over to you.
I think the reason it's so split is because everybody has a different idea of how to reduce cost, right? So, best of breed, depending upon how it's used, could reduce cost because you could get more out of what that tool is doing. Maximizing existing security tools, obviously, you've already got to spend there. There could be CapEx, and then consolidating security investments. I think there's some real OpEx advantages to consolidation that might be much greater than reducing the spend on a subscription or a license. So I'm not surprised that everybody is kind of going different directions. I think the answer, and this goes back to my analyst days, is it depends. It depends on what your teams require in order to achieve your business outcome, right? And there's just different ways to do that.
And David, I couldn't agree more. It's, everyone's trying to be a good steward of their resources, make sure that they're maximizing the investments that they already have. I could see in the consolidation angle of wanting to reduce complexity of operating tools and making sure things are working together. I could see from the maximizing the existing tools, just again, finding new use cases to make sure you're extracting all the value out of it. And best of breed, and like we talked about the big three initial access vectors in the first part of the conversation, making sure we're looking at where threat actors are going and making sure we're doing what we can to reduce the cost of a breach coming in from those perspectives. So yeah, I can see based on the interpretation of the question, folks have different ways that they respond to it. Maybe just one parting thought on this. If you think of your security tools as really a portfolio that you're investing, where can you shift within that portfolio based on what you're seeing from the incidents affecting your organization to shore up one side of your defensive posture where it may not be as attacked on the other side. So, but yeah, really interesting results to see these come in, Joe.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed the latter one.
Yeah. Well, I like that a lot. And I think, Joe, you said earlier that we're going to get some answers in the next 30 minutes. So I'm going to step back and let you guys give us some answers on how to address these concerns that our audience is bringing up. With that, Joe, take us through it.
Thank you, Jess. And we'll provide an answer and some opportunities, but just this applies to much, much more. So we really want to talk about is our relationship, the specific integrations that we all offer together, talk a little about how our customers are taking advantage of this and get into this integrated solution. Before we do, let's just kind of set the stage here. So security operations is where we're all sitting. Right, so we're looking at the group that protects your firm, whether this is just Larry and Jane on a security team of a small company or a formal SOC environment which has threat hunting and incident response. Maybe you're leveraging some outsourced solutions to get some help with SecureWorks or whatnot to enrich and augment your security teams. At the end of the day, security operations is where in the group that's looking to protect your org. But of course, now, what do we start to do? We start to bring on tools. We start to bring on technologies, as you've all seen here with the poll questions. We've heard up to 75 to up to 100 different security products being utilized by certain firms. So you start to build up those silos. When we talk about the silos, what exactly are we looking at here? I like to think of, well, there's probably, for a fairly sophisticated firm, some flavor of an identity product, an IAM, identity access management, privileged access management. We're certainly doing something to secure the endpoint. We're securing web, we're securing email. We may be looking at network traffic. We likely have a firewall, likely have many firewalls. We're protecting the cloud. There are so many different tools and so many different technologies out there. Some folks want to consolidate with one vendor and hope that one vendor has the right strategy that protects everything. Others want to pick best of breeds. Others pick this technology stack that works for you. What's interesting is in my journeys, and I'd be curious, Dave and Ryan, if you're seeing anything similar, I don't find too many exact same security stacks when I go see a potential customer and talk through. There's a number of different flavors. I mean, there's 5,000 security products out there. So, I mean, did anyone disagree?
No. And adding to the complexity is the architectures are continuously evolving with like hyperscaler workloads, right? So there's multiple architectures and multiple stacks for multiple environments. So no, it's even gotten more infinitely complex, and infinite times two. Sound like a 13-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, we see this not only with the tools that are deployed, but also the people within the organization that are trying to operationalize these tools. And so you can, there could be interpersonal conflicts, there can be operating conflicts, there could be different priorities. And so getting them at parity at the same time can be a real struggle to harmonize across all your different aspects of your defense.
Who would have thought one of the coolest jobs in cybersecurity would be a security architect, trying to figure out how to stitch together the right solutions, the right workflows, it's people, it's process, and then lastly, technology.
They're more conflict managers than anything else, Joe. Let's be honest.
That's fair. That's fair. So, the other major factor that's focused that is a issue today that maybe wasn't as big of a deal 4 or 5 years ago was just kind of the evolving workforce, the work from anywhere. So when you start to look right now, we've got, Ryan, the DC area, we've got David out in the Pacific West. I'm in the Boston area. We're working from home. And then I'm going to hop on a plane. I'll be working from the airport. And then I'm going to work from a hotel room, maybe a Starbucks, right? So protecting the users where they are. This concept of hybrid workforce, whether folks are going back to work more or less, is kind of irrelevant. We need to secure everything everywhere. And that's an increased risk, right? Because folks are in these unmanaged environments. They're using cloud technologies with this cloud transformation. So you're outsourcing a little bit of the security outside of your environment to your cloud provider. And then you have to master that security technology and make sure that you have it configured appropriately. So just a round of challenges abroad. So what we've done in a part of Mimecast, Netskope, and SecureWorks is really look at saying, okay, We offer a really great solution, but we want to make sure it's deeply integrated, easy to turn on and set up, easy to gain the visibility. So when you're looking at these three products, they're acting in unison, they're acting as one. They aren't three different point silos like we talked about earlier. So before we get into the actual integrations themselves, what I'd like to do real quick is just give a little recap reminding about how all of us kind of play in the security space, how, what, and where. So Mimecast, for example, as you probably know, 40,000 customers across the globe, and we focus on email threat protection. So we'll scan every inbound email, we'll scan every outbound email, we'll block the bad, we'll deliver the good, tons of detection capabilities. In addition to that, pertinent to this conversation, is we have an awareness training program and a product offering there. So we can actually train your users, little kind of fun monthly snippets. The training's a minute and a half to answer one question, so it's really engaging, and we can get a lot of intelligence from your user base as well as increase their awareness. And we also have a DLP, being able to check on the outbound side whether you violated any policies. We're going to put a big pin in that, so we're going to talk about that in a few more minutes when we get into the integration with Netskope. But at a macro level, when you think of Mimecast, think of email security, think of awareness training with extra DLP capabilities. Now let's pivot over to a different vector, which is Netskope, David.
Thanks a lot, Joe. So if I were to simplify, Netskope is a cloud-based security solution that is focused on keeping your information under your control. So keep the good information inside, make sure that there's no bad activity coming in, and maintain a positive control over the risk posture. So understand what people are doing and have positive control to enable them to do their jobs with the least amount of risk. And all of this is to enable the new way that workers engage with the internet, which is getting whatever they need in order to do their jobs just in time.
Thank you, David. Now, last but certainly not least, then Ryan, let's talk a little bit about SecureWorks and where you kind of provide the overlay over the top of both of these products, in addition to many, many others.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So we have a solution we call Taegis XDR, which is an extended detection and response solution delivered from a SaaS-based cloud delivery model. This technology allows us to unite the signals from both of your platforms and then bring it together with other signals in your organization, be it endpoint detection and response products, traditional on-prem network security controls, identity directories, so on and so forth. Really, with that goal is to provide a unified fabric of visibility so we can detect threats coming in through any of these vectors and help you quickly detect and respond to those to mitigate harm to your business. Again, to that risk reduction point we've been talking about throughout our conversation today. And then with this platform, which is really exciting for us, is we can deliver a very scalable managed detection and response capability. So we can bring experts to your team and have them integrated within your security operations workflow in a collaborative investigation space. So it's been a really exciting platform for us to not only help organizations defend from the threats that they're facing and respond to them in cooperation with solutions like yours, but also to engage with our customers in a very collaborative way to really bring friction out of that process.
Fun to be a part of your platform. And I'm trying to capture, and I'm failing miserably, the questions that are coming in pseudo real time, and ensure we encapsulate some of those in the responses that we're providing. So please keep them coming, though. We are seeing them come through. And there was a handful of questions tied to what does each of the products actually do. So hopefully we covered that. And also, as Jess covered earlier, if you have questions that we don't get to, if you put them in the Q&A, we will get them at the end with a post follow-up. So what we want to talk before we get into the integration itself are what are the benefits of integrating? And there are so many when you look at the various integrations that we'll talk about. But one of the key things I think of is it increases the security posture, it increases the efficacy of your tools if you apply threat sharing. So let's just say email gets a threat, we block an attachment, some malware, an attack on one of your users. we can keep that in our little email black box, not share the fact that Billy was attacked, or we could actually take that threat and share that with all of the other tools in your detection stack. So add that to your firewall, add that to your CASB, add that to your web security, add that to your cloud security, and ensure that when the attacker, or if the attacker tries a different vector, that we're going to guarantee that we're going to block that attack because one of your detection capabilities has seen that. And I find that just gives you that comfort, increases protection. No one's perfect. No one says they will be perfect. But if someone sees and detects a threat, let's make sure your security environment is all operating in unison. Are there any favorites, Dave, from your perspective?
Oh man, I love them all. It's like asking me what my favorite dog is. Um, So, and this is in response to a couple of the questions that I've seen about, risk and how risk plays into this whole world. But so adaptive user policies to me is very, very important because one of the things that what we're trying to do is create this seamless, frictionless experience. I can make any network secure by unplugging it. That was the joke in the 90s, right? I don't need a firewall. I just need the guy to take out the connection to the switch. What we want is people to be able to continuously do what they need to do with the minimum amount of risk. And by having this way of sharing these signals about what is normal versus abnormal behavior, however it's surfaced in our different views of engagement with the internet, private resources on the internet, public websites, or SaaS applications, in addition to the way they engage with email and other systems like the training outcomes from Mimecast or the behavioral observations from an EDR perspective being consumed by Taegis, we can feed that into this overall view of what that user's actual risk is and then make response actions in all these platforms to say, okay, hold on, Dave is maybe a little dangerous. And right now we're going to reduce some of the things that Dave can do by uploading his favorite puppy video, which actually contains really sensitive information. We're not going to let him do that, but we're going to let him continue to surf the web and look at puppy pictures. So, this kind of ongoing, as risk goes up, you change and reduce access. And then as risk goes down, you restore full functionality. We have to make that seamless because people expect their jobs to be able to be done without someone pulling the plug on them. So I get very passionate about adaptive use policies.
Yeah, and David, I have to echo some of your points here. And I know better now how to fish you by sending you lures with puppy pictures in it. But it's in terms of reducing the effort and the friction in these processes, I think in previous eras of security, it was easy to write this stuff on paper and say this is the plan, this is how we're going to orchestrate it between all these different tools and platforms. But when it came into practice, it became a lot of people, a lot of process, and maybe the technologies didn't fully live up to expectation. So what really resonates with me on here is enabling SecOps to respond faster. The faster we can observe these signals, determine it's a threat, and go to contain and mitigate the threat, the less harm is done into the enterprise. And then moving up on this side, the simplifying threat remediation. Let's have some battle-tested, tried and true containment and response actions available at a click that can take those actions in your platforms or in other parts of your enterprise to contain. And that's going to really enable that speed you talk about of being able to ratchet up when things are looking a little bit more risky and then dial it back when it's business as usual.
Yeah, if I could just say one last thing, Joe, I think the key is that no one security solution or IT solution is going to have visibility to everything. So, but the correlation of that contextual data is so critical to enabling us at scale to respond. And that's why I get excited about the Taegis platform and the concept of XDR, because we see web transactions and we see some email, but Mimecast sees all of this email, and then Taegis sees all this other information. And no one of those things is going to have all of the data needed to understand what is the appropriate response. But even if you had all that data, and we see this with data lakes and SIMs, there's just tons and tons of data, the correlation through an integration to then turn information into intelligence, into action, that's where this gets really exciting. And that's the business outcome my customers tend to ask for with integrations. It's what are the outcomes? What are the automated outcomes that we can affect?
100%. We've got a couple of questions coming in. One, how are Mimecast and SecureWorks integrated in XDR? Well, hopefully we'll cover that in the next few minutes, so that's good. There's a couple of product questions, which what we'll do is we'll get to you specifics offline. I don't want to go into details of any one of our products because that could be a whole separate webinar that's out there. A couple of AI questions, which goes back to the earlier chat we had. All right, let's keep rolling then, but please keep the questions coming in. Let's talk now specifically about what these integrations are. I'm using plurals for a reason. There's multiple integrations between Mimecast and Netskope, Netskope and Taegis, Mimecast and Taegis, all across the board. So this isn't a one-time light version of an integration. So let's start by a scenario. Mimecast, say you receive an email with a user, it has a payload, it could be a malicious link that we've identified or a malicious attachment. Well, this is particularly nasty or a zero-day threat. What we do with the integration is share that threat with the user. With Netskope. So we're able to see the fact that an email came in with a payload. We will not deliver that to your user, but with the integration, we'll share that threat with Netskope. So we share that with Netskope's Cloud Threat Exchange, which is a really powerful capability Netskope created, which can do more than just add to a Netskope block list. So Dave, what happens when an email comes with that payload? It's automatically shared with your Cloud Threat Exchange. What happens with that threat?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we respect customer privacy, right? So the information when it gets shared with Netskope is really being shared with that customer's security solution. And what we find is by taking that information and letting the customer decide what to do with it, block is one outcome. But in a lot of cases, it could be coaching. It could be justification. What if it's a security analyst who needs to get that data in order to understand what's going on? So there's multiple outcomes to drive the appropriate level of enforcement based on the risk. And that can all be designated in this threat exchange to say this kind of information of this severity from this source is going to go into this particular policy. Everything else is going to go into this other, where maybe we just alert. So there's a huge level of decision making and power that you can bring instead of just saying we're going to block everything. Again, blocking everything is not a viable solution in this time and age. You have to have more options than that.
And is it true then if we share a particular threat with Netskope, we can take various actions within Netskope systems, but you also can share that with other integrated technologies such as your endpoint providers or your firewall providers or others. So it's sort of a many-to-many threat sharing, furthering the impact.
That's exactly the case. Now, not every customer yet has Taegis, which could probably do something very similar. But we believe in this so much, and I think really every security platform that reaches a certain stage believes that you have to share information with everyone. We're a community of good fighting the bad, right? So yes, when the information is brought into Threat Exchange, our goal is to share it with as many systems for that customer's implementation as possible, because what one knows, everybody should know as soon as possible. Because invariably, these polymorphic attacks, people have spent some money. Increasingly, it's not a lot of money, but they've spent some money building these attacks. So if it's not successful against a cloud element, they're going to go after some other. They're going to go through email. They're going to go after text. They're going to go after endpoint. So why not share that with the other security solutions?
Okay, so when you see there's two arrows if you have the magnifying glass here. So Mimecast will share threats with the Cloud Threat Exchange, or the Cloud Threat Exchange can share threats from any of those other sources with Mimecast to take actions such as blocking and training and whatnot. So pretty powerful integration. Moving on to the second integration, which is, as we talked about, Mimecast has a training product, awareness training. So we have the ability not only to know from a user perspective who's heavily targeted, who clicked on a link and was warned the link was probably malicious and blasted through that. So we have your actions baked into a score, but also how you did with the actual training results. And we also ask periodic questions on user sentiment. So we have a real lot of rich data on users from an email perspective. But what we can do is share that with Netskope's Cloud Risk Exchange to be able to commingle that with the cloud-based scores and scores from other sources to get I'm going to use a terrible word, super score, for you to then be able to apply various policies and responses based off of those scores. So David, why don't you elaborate and clarify what
Yeah,
you
yeah.
said?
And this is where AI needs to be co-piloted or whatever you call it, right? Because the idea is every system has a different understanding of what constitutes risk in its universe. But you need to correlate that based on the needs of an organization across all of these different risk numbers. And so my A might be your 100, might be someone else's, I don't know, omega, whatever. Those all have to be rendered into a common framework using a tool like a shared SSF or CAPE standard so that it has become my risk score is meaningful to your risk score. And then what we want to do is get to the point where we can create that single aggregate or superset score that says, okay, hold on, everybody is saying, I'm going to pick on you, Joe, this time. Joe Tibbetts is the problem, right? We figured it out, and Mimecast said it was a problem. Oh, and by the way, Taegis figured it out too. We've done all this correlation. Your score is high right now. That's great. That's really important. But without taking action, it kind of falls apart. So the next step is trigger response. And that response could be, again, change real-time access that Joe has to, viewing puppy pictures. Sorry, Joe, I'm going to carry that on. Or make it so that Joe can only browse the web or open up a support ticket saying, why can't I go to Salesforce? Because Salesforce access has been temporarily suspended while we figure out why Joe has such a bad score. So correlation hopefully ultimately leads to causation, and causation leads to response and activation of a reduced policy, reduced access. And then as things spin back and risk is restored or risk is reduced rather, everything gets restored. And it's the seamless response, continuous level of automation to make it so that you're not just locking Joe out once and never again. Again, it goes up and it goes down.
And you can put people in training programs and list them in browser isolation so they can do no harm. You can get draconian and say, you know what, I'm not letting that Joe Tibbetts guy send out any outbound emails because he's a disaster. You pick the policy, the adaptive policy that works for your organization based on your scenario.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think in the past, SOAR platforms are powerful, but they're almost like too powerful. There's too many options. So what we need to do is work with you as practitioners to come up with a, let's say, top 2, top 3 responses that really start to contain the problem for your incident response teams to figure out what the problem is, and then inject a more programmatic response to prevent this from happening in the future. SOAR platforms have so many options that I think a lot of us just freak out and back away. And so what we want to do is get to the point where if we've all agreed that someone is highly risky, there are 1, 2, or 3 response actions that are taken to reduce that risk without having to create a very extensive playbook of, like, I'm going to do this, and then that's going to do this, and that's going to do this. Fear is the enemy of security, honestly. It doesn't help us. It actually makes our job worse because we're less likely to automate, and we need automation at these kinds of scales.
We get that all the time. What are our peers doing in this scenario? What are our peers doing in this scenario? And you see that a lot in the forums and whatnot too. All right, so to summarize, we're sharing threats in pseudo real time. We're sharing malicious URL, links, domains. We're sharing hashes, attachments of malware back and forth between the two systems. We're now integrating and sharing user risk scores for adaptive profiles and policies. We're also able to, and we said, let's put a pin in DLP. Well, let's pull the plug on that one. So we have a DLP engine of the Mimecast side, which works for email, because that's what we offer. Netskope has DLP that applies to, I think we call it omnichannel DLP. So many different vectors, many different, it doesn't really care the source. So what we've had some customers say is, hey, wait a minute here. I don't want to set up my 731 policies in the email system and then do it over in Netskope's system. Can we route mails through Netskope's policy engine? And the answer is, of course you can. So what we've done is actually built a very simple configuration where mails on the outbound side go to Netskope. Netskope goes through the detection capabilities, determines whatever it does, says, hey, this is good, this is bad, etc., gives that back to Mimecast. So one set of policies, one engine with all the detailed DLP logs and scanning results are all where you want that in your DLP engine here in Netskope. And then Mimecast has email delivery and control. Netskope said deliver this one. Netskope said block this one. So our logs tell you exactly what traffic and what we did with the email based off of results from your DLP engine, which happened not to be ours, happened to be Netskope. So if you want to use two DLP engines, that's fine, have at it. If you want to use just an email one, that's fine. If you want to get more efficient, consolidate on Netscopes, those are all options to you. Mr. Willis, over to you.
I don't know what more can be said, Joe. You covered everything. I just hope everyone was able to catch all of it. I think the key is, defense in depth. Data protection is ultimately one of the primary outcomes that we're all aiming for because it's one of the primary goals of the bad guys, right? There's many reasons why they engage in your infrastructure, but one of them is to get your data. And there's two ways to do that. One is because the bad guys do it, and the other is because the good guys do it, right? We just screw up. We don't know what's private. We don't know what's confidential. Or we're sharing something with someone that we think is okay, and today they're okay, and tomorrow they're not. So having this kind of omni-channel approach where we treat everything the same simplifies. Again, the goal is to reduce complexity, to encourage automation, and to minimize all these different widgets. So by having a DLP policy that can be applied to all these different methods of communication, we're able to trigger and coach users to the appropriate kinds of sharing and block it when it's clearly inappropriate. So it's a very powerful combination of detection on our side and enforcement on the Mimecast side. No one can do what Mimecast can do at the scales of these emails that are coming in and going out. So it's a great integration.
Perfect. And I think Ryan's coffee break may be coming to an end. So we'll see how this goes here. Now let's incorporate our XDR platform. So I'll start by saying the integration that Mimecast offers with Taegis is the ability to ingest email logs to start. So what we have is a log of every email that's come to Mimecast. So it's literally every email you've sent. And we received it, we processed it, and we blocked it because it was bad for this reason, or you asked us to convert a macro-enabled Excel file into a PDF, and then we delivered it to this user with this information, right? So that's kind of the core email security logs. What we've done, though, based off of the Taegis analysts, is they said, well, that's great. I want more information on why things were blocked. So we incorporated what we call our threat protection logs, which is really just more intel based off of the reasons why things were bad. So we give you our URL click logs, all the details of the scanning. We give you our attachment scanning detail logs. We have the ability for you to capture our impersonation logs. So all those AI services that determine that this person's impersonating, all of that rich information is brought into the Taegis platform, along with David, from Netskope's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Taegis has done an amazing job of taking in our millions of logs per day, if not per hour, for some of our larger customers, and focusing in again on those valuable alerts. But is there value? I mean, quantity has a quality all its own. It's overwhelming. But Taegis is able to take in all of our different kinds of alert logs, which is anomalous behavior or policy violations, DLP violations. There's many, and make sense of it. So they're able to basically read anything that our platform would surface organically and ingest it at speed and at scale in order to then normalize it and tie it into other systems that don't necessarily have those same insights in the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, David and Joe, you both really captured the heart of it here is by receiving these signals into the platform. One, instantly, any data that touches this platform, we keep for a year, period, full stop. So you have that look back capability within the platform, either for a compliance use case that you're retaining this kind of security telemetry, but it's also extraordinarily illuminating for threat hunting use cases. As we've seen in the past couple of years, there's been dormant threats that were unknown for months at a time and then revealed to the industry. Having data from these platforms and your other platforms in Taegis gives you that look back to know whether you have evidence of absence or an absence of evidence, and now it's time to hunt in your environment for a particular threat. So having that data in there is key. And then bringing in SecureWorks CTU, our counter threat unit, where we're researching within, working with law enforcement communities, understanding threat behaviors, threat groups, their motivations, observing it through IR in our incident response practice, observing it in the platform from the MDR service. We can see a broad perspective, not only of every individual organization, but across the landscape as a whole for threat activity. So it helps us kind of bring this together. And then, of course, we need to synthesize this data and enrich it with other signals in the environment, which could be EDR, on-prem network security controls, cloud platforms, in addition to Mimecast and Netskope. And we can perform a comprehensive investigation to either have confidence that this threat was mitigated and there's no further action needed, or there's more here. We need to investigate deeper and possibly engage incident response resources to help evict a threat actor in the environment. And with the detection and response capabilities coming out of the platform, it allows us to perform containment actions in a variety of tools, including Mimecast and Netskope. But it could also be your EDR solution if you needed to contain a host for a more urgent threat to prevent that lateral movement. So it's been really, I think folks can hear the enthusiasm that we all have for having our solutions really complement each other and provide that fabric. And it's really what's made it such a joy to work with both of your organizations to bring this to the market.
There's one comment that I hear from our mutual customers on the Taegis side is they say when they utilize you for that kind of help with the managed security, it's every time that they get the threat when they had to go alone, they were sitting there trying to fumble through identifying and do the whole incident response attack chain, etc. And they said, boy, when you give it to a Taegis, they've seen this thing 2 weeks ago because of all of their customers. That this is kind of like a steady state role for you guys. So it's like bringing in a big brother to kind of help.
That's a great point, Joe. And our SecOps team, let's put it this way, they get a lot of at-bats helping to defend against threats. And so they have that experience and confidence where your organization, this might be a once in 6 month event, and you may not have the muscle memory or the skill or the context. And the way we're able to bring this in a very seamless, collaborative way with our customers is exciting, not only because we can help defend, but also there's, that big brother kind of way, there is some kind of upskilling that can happen. By seeing our operators work in the same console, your team can learn as to use the product under the direction of some of how our best and brightest use the product.
So we've got a couple questions coming in. Thank you for that. Let's. I don't know who this is directed to, so if you both want to take it, that might not be terrible. How difficult is it to set up these integrations?
So for us, with what we've shown here, it's actually going in and utilizing a tool called Cloud Exchange, which is very easy and straightforward to install in any environment that you want. And after that, you just pick which integrations you want to enable, you entitle those, and you're off and running. So the hardest part is creating the right API token and making sure that you entitle this solution to appropriately communicate. So I'm happy that as a part of this presentation, we also prepared a solution deployment guide to kind of take you from zero to hero. And that will enable you as a user of these technologies to get up and running very, very quickly.
And I'll add, Joe, from the Taegis perspective, we've worked with both teams to develop very clear guidance about how to configure tools to send telemetry into the Taegis platform. And we have live chat built into the product where you can ask an expert, get a response in less than a minute to get help on security issues or helping with some of the integration guidance.
Fabulous, thank you. We'll do one more and then we'll pivot. It appears organizations they want to I guess it's saying, do I need to purchase additional tools to utilize these enhancements? So I'll start with the Mimecast perspective is no, we offer with any of our email security packages the ability to turn on threat sharing. If you don't have our training product, then we will have no risk score to be able to offer up there. So that is one requirement for the risk score.
I'll just say that there's going to be a QR code, and it's actually to my Venmo account. So if you want to send me money, no, the integrations that we deliver, there is no additional fee for any integration. Like Joe said, you might need to have functionality that you've essentially purchased inside Netskope to deliver something like a user confidence score or risk score. But the actual integrations themselves, there is no fee, and it is fully supported with a 24/7 shop on the back end. So if there's any issues, you just open up a ticket, and we will take care of the problem.
Yeah, and really in that same spirit, with our managed detection response solution, and or if you're a software only subscriber to Taegis XDR, in complexity is the enemy of security, and we wanted even the commercials and solution for products to be very simple. So everything you need's included and ready to go.
Perfect. Well, let's then just touch base on maybe a core use case. We won't go through all 5 of these. Maybe I'll pick on that threat intelligence sharing. So just envision a day where we'll pick on Ryan. He is attacked by somebody. He receives a piece of malware. Mimecast sees that. We interrogate that attachment, determine it malicious. Maybe it goes down to a sandbox or whatnot. We share that literal hash over with Netskope. Netskope adds that to the CASB block list. We have that threat being shared with an endpoint device that's also tied to the Cloud Threat Exchange. And if a user or if that malicious attacker decides a different vector, maybe they try to attack you via Teams to try to get you to link to a Dropbox file or whatnot's out there, either your Netscope detection will guarantee to not allow that to be accessed, or the endpoint will not allow that file to be accessed. So regardless of whether the technology could have or would have detected that, because Mimecast saw that we're sharing that. It also works in reverse as well. I think that's one core protection use case. Maybe Dave, you want to take a stab, pick a number,
Sure.
and have some fun?
You know what? I'm going to pick zero trust because it's the Rorschach blot of the security industry. First of all, nobody knows what the heck it means. So to me, zero trust is really it's a discussion and it's a set of thought processes around what constitutes a appropriate approach to security. And what is exciting to me is, we started with the AI. I'll be back. It really comes into all of this because what we're trying to do is pull as much information and telemetry out of all of our systems as possible in order to create a real-time view of what are users doing on certain devices with certain personas, with a certain applications, and what is the risk of all of that. And it's not enough to say that the risk is known. Zero trust is really, how do we programmatically out of the gate reduce risk so that the right users are accessing the right data from the right devices? But it's also a response network, which is, okay, yeah, we started with that, but things have varied. There's been drift from the known safe. And is that drift acceptable or is it not? And it's not enough that one product does it. There is no way that one product is going to solve the zero trust problem. It's not just a person. It's not a system. That's the key of zero trust. So what's exciting is integrations allow us to get to the point where zero trust becomes something that isn't just on paper, but is in fact a architecture and an approach that can be implemented. So, we've shown you some of these technologies like surfacing indicators that are dangerous, passing that to Taegis, having Taegis respond back, having the platforms exchange information. All of those are elements of a zero trust strategy to keep us moving closer and closer to this frictionless but safe approach to working with the internet as it exists today.
And maybe I'll just, some of the use cases that really resonate with me, or I really will take 4 and 5 together: centralized threat response and lateral movement. Being able to unite these signals into Taegis XDR gives us that control plane where we can reach out and help contain and mitigate threats into other parts of the organization. But as we talked about ransomware in earlier parts of our chat today, lateral movement and detecting when that happens, when the adversary is in, if they can spread quickly throughout other parts of the environment, exfiltrate data, and then go to move towards ransoming the environment, this is our opportunity to detect a threat. At this point, it's not game over, it's game on. How can we contain them here before they spread even further? So that really resonates with me personally, seeing a lot of the harm and consequences of post-intrusion ransomware. So I'm always excited when we can have that win on behalf of our customers to prevent a really bad day that they would otherwise suffer.
What if I could just say one? What's exciting to me about all these use cases is they do feed off of one another. So threat protection reduces the attack surface. Zero trust creates another way to further reduce the attack surface and respond when seeing unusual behaviors. And then that centralized threat response and lateral movement, that takes into account an attack just right now, just in time, and being able to control, constrain, and reduce or eliminate that altogether. So it's so cool that we've got these integrations that we're presenting to you that actually feed off of each other and deliver all of these use cases with the same fabric.
And that's a key part of that integrated security stack, right? It's not, you can't just have a light integration where maybe there's a sharing. You really need these things deeply integrated. Hopefully this is coming across in our conversation here. I believe we have a very short window. Maybe we'll take a question or two. Just two? Okay, perfect. So let's take a look at the end of the day. So just to summarize, I think what you've seen here is an integrated environment is really what we're hearing from all of our mutual customers as that best practice. It's the best in class when you look at, you can pick and choose the vendors that you're interested in that can solve the use cases that are concerning to you, that are all letting you act in unison and significantly more efficiently than running a bunch of portals and silos. Anything else, David, Ryan, you want to do in a recap or summary?
I think that summarizes it quite nicely, and I'm excited to get to a few questions.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, if you scan this code, what this will give you is the details that David mentioned and just mentioned earlier, which is the details of all of our integrations. So it talks about the Cloud Risk Exchange, Cloud Threat Exchange, the XDR integration, the DLP integration, and much more. So if you want the details, take a look here. If you want us to respond back to you with any of your questions, just ask a question in the chat. If we don't get to it today, we will do so as a result of our follow-up. Let's start with, okay, so what I've done is I've tried to peel away questions that weren't tied to what we just covered there. First one, can you give a real-world example of how utilizing the integration would play out in real time for a threat versus not having the integration at all?
Joe, I've got a really good use case for that. We were working with this in our lab recently, where bringing these products together, we were able to see a scenario where Mimecast had visibility to email coming into the environment, but it happened to be a particular threat attachment that, due to how the policies were configured, or maybe it was a way to how the threat actor adapted it, wasn't known to be bad at that time or didn't appear to be suspicious. However, once it landed on a machine and the user engaged with it, it reached out through Netskope to try to download additional malicious payload. Netskope was able to see this instantly and give that threat context alert into XDR. Within the XDR application, we were able to then look at other artifacts as observed by the EDR agent on that machine and what else that user had interacted with just before and just after these particular threats, able to bring it together in an investigation to know here's the sequence of events that led to it, and then reach into Mimecast to execute search and destroy and remove that attachment from other users that had seen it but not engaged with it yet, and then additional preventive controls on the Netskope side to make sure other users didn't reach out to it. And seeing this come together, it really kind of gave me chills to watch this all come together in practice about how seamless it was able to execute across all the platforms.
Yeah, I think, anecdotally, I've had several customers come up to me and say, look, I know your threat protections are very powerful. You've detected something that was not observed in another platform. And it's not because we're terrible. It's just because of the way our algorithms work. So what happens is we surface something, and because we share it with Mimecast maybe hasn't seen it before. And so they see it for the first time, or that malware might have been on a device it just wasn't activated yet. And so by putting it into a place where the scanner picks it up and says, look for it, now we're able to see it before it activates. And so we're getting better. It's not necessarily that we're replacing each other's technology, we're augmenting it, and we're doing it in a fashion that is really providing that defense in depth. So it has absolutely come up, and it is definitely better than not having these products be integrated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I hear a lot about the Cloud Risk Exchange integration, where folks are just really the insider risk, the compromised user, really just looking at how can I get more intelligence on my resources and what their activities are so I can take advantage. And it's not a what do you do with the integrated or not. If you're not integrated, you don't have that data available, you're just less protected across the board. All right. Let's do one more, and then we'll call it a day. I think it's been a really, really interesting conversation. Last question. Instead of focusing on the types of tools available, how should we categorize what we need to protect? So, for example, they're saying, do I need to protect data or services or the structure? And how do they structure their cybersecurity around that? Which is interesting because it seems to be asking to say what's more important, protecting a server or data. Or
I think I'm smiling because really the question, which I totally understand, is shifting the silos from vendors to the devices, right, or to a different artifact. I think the reality for most customers tends to be I need to create a risk framework. And based on the assets that are the riskiest, how do I protect those? And what is involved in that, right? It's not any one thing. It's not just saying, oh, this endpoint is really important. It's a combination of the endpoint, the access that endpoint has, the user that's on that endpoint, right? And establishing what is the highest risk that is available to that combination, and then protecting that, and then working your way down the onion, from most at risk, most impactful if lost, to least. That's at least my thought.
I mean, I agree, David. And in the sense too, is when you're defending your organization, if that asset supports a critical business service, right, that should increase your level of vigilance against defending that particular asset. Or if it contains information that's particularly sensitive, that should drive up your vigilance with defending that particular asset. So it's one of the it's you can pick your lens that you want to look at these through, and ultimately I think as security professionals, we need to find a way to communicate with our business and our business leaders and what resonates for them, what they understand, what they're protecting from the enterprise, and what this investment that they're making in our team and tools can bring about to help their business carry out its mission and not have to worry about cyber threats. So I do really appreciate the question because it's very thoughtful, right? I think we're beyond the days of let's just throw tools at the problem. We need to have a really thoughtful, integrated approach to get the outcomes we're looking for.
Fair question, tricky answer. No easy answers. Prioritization, right, at the end of the day. Well, I'd like to say thank you, Jess. I think we're probably very close to being at or over time. So if so, I apologize, but we just had a little fun here.
Yeah, we're right up on it, but I didn't want to jump in. I thought about, playing the music and wrapping it up, but honestly, I think I was enjoying this whole conversation just as much as our audience has been. This has been so much fun. And I know we've said this a few times, but anyone who asked a question today is going to get some answers. I'll also really encourage everyone to use that QR code if they haven't already. So make sure that you've got that and make sure that you do reach out and follow up with this team, because obviously there is so much more to cover. I feel like we need to do 7 other webinars of just spin-off discussions on each one. We got to go back to that's what I want. I want a full webinar on each one of those case studies you gave us, Joe. That's what we're
We'd be happy to.
Perfect. Well, we will all look forward to that. Before you do take off, because I'm sure that there are so many people out there right now that are really feeling like they've had that interest peaked and they want to keep this conversation going, what do you suggest is the first step and the best way to kind of keep their momentum going and keep learning a little bit more?
I would say the easiest way is to put a question into the chat window, the Q&A window, and that way we will make sure we respond to you. We're seeing a lot of, over 150 different questions coming in so far, right? So if you ping us whatever, and it can be a detailed question on how SecureWorks does X, Y, and Z, or whatever, doesn't matter. Ask and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, you can even just ask a pop culture question, ask what favorite dog these guys have, whatever you want. Throw a question in there. Don't let the creative question be the barrier to entry. Ask them what their favorite flavor of ice cream is if you have to, but make sure you get on the radar, get those questions in. Again, guys, really wish we could keep going. Sorry to say that we'll have to wrap it up, but this has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for being here with us today for leading this really interesting conversation.
No, thanks a lot. It was fun.
It's been great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Okay, and now we have one final question for all of you, and I'm going to do this one a little differently this time. I'm actually going to show you guys the results. So this one is a question that's a little bit more for you all. We've let our speakers take off, but we're kind of curious about where you're at in terms of this potential security blob or security Frankenstein that you may have built, or maybe it's a super efficient system you have. Let us know. How many security tools are you utilizing in your environment today? Are you in the 0 to 10, 11 to 25, 25 to 50, or above 50? And remember, we're not going to judge you, and I am going to show you the results, but it's not going to show your name. So if you're feeling worried at all about showing your name next to the results, I promise no one will see if you're maybe feeling a little concerned about that number. So let us know. I'm going to leave that up for another second longer. While I do that, or while you're clicking on that poll, I'm also going to remind you to head over to the handouts tab and be sure that you click on that resource tab from Mimecast there, because Mimecast, SecureWorks, and Netskope have put together a bit of a resource console for you about using integrated security to overcome adversaries. So following up immediately on this presentation, there are solution briefs for you. There's a review of the Mimecast and Netskope integration. You can look at SecureWorks 2022 State of the Threat, a year in review, as well as cybersecurity threat intelligence blog. Just some awesome resources for you there. They're all there in one place. So make sure you've got that tab opened up before we leave, and hold on to that, because it's sort of it's a turducken of resources. There's resources in resources and resources on that. So make sure you've got that open and ready. All right, I'm going to show you guys the results from this poll here. Let's take a quick look and see where you guys are all at. I'm sure you're curious. So it looks like we've got the vast majority in that 0 to 10 range. And then the second one being, a little bit in the 11 to 25. So that's kind of interesting. It shows that a lot of you are really putting a lot of effort and energy into this kind of efficiency in terms of, maybe a little bit less is more. But then the question remains, are you using the right tools? Are you using them in the right way? Are they communicating efficiently? And there's lots more to dig into with those as well. So really interesting results coming back from that. All right, folks. Well, we are going to move along to the last, and I'm sure exciting bit of this this webinar here. Although, really, what could top the last hour and a half we've all spent together getting to sit in on some really fascinating conversations? But let's go ahead and give away our $250 Amazon gift card. This is going to Dun, 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 dun. My Mung of Massachusetts. My Mung of Massachusetts. Okay, congratulations to you, Mai. We will be following up with you after we wrap, and so stay tuned for that. All right, well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank all of our sponsors here today. Boy, did we have an all-star cast joining us of both presenters and solutions here. So Mimecast, Netskope, and SecureWorks. I really want to thank you for sending these incredible speakers, Joseph, David, and Ryan, and letting us sit in on a conversation. I felt like I was sitting at a cafe listening to friends chit-chat about things that I could probably listen to all afternoon, really. And on that note, a big high five and thank you to all of you for joining me at the cafe, for sitting in at the table with me, and for making this entire webinar possible just by showing up, by giving your time, by asking those questions, participating in the polls, and really just being an all-around awesome part of our community. I hope that you really had as much fun as I did here today, and I hope that you're walking away with maybe some cool brain tingling bits and light up moments that you want to spend some time digging into and thinking about how that might work at your organization, maybe making some changes or enhancements to your security portfolio there. So really excited to hear back on how things went for all of you, and thank you all so much for being here again. I hope that I get to see you soon on a webinar, an EcoCast, a Megacast, whatever it is. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful end to your week.